Good evening. Welcome to the regular council meeting for Wednesday, May 3rd, 2023. Ms. Monroe, if you'd like to call us to order, or do the roll call.
Mayor Don Barnard.
Yes.
Don Merriman.
Here.
Jaron Hendry. Charlie Campbell.
Here.
Nicole Shook.
Here.
Bob Orsini.
Here.
Brian Green.
Here. If we could all stand for the invocation by Pastor Matt Van Winkle from the Johnstown United Methodist Church.
Let us pray. O gracious Father and God of us all, we ask for your blessings of kindness and mercy and discernment and wisdom to be upon each gathered here. We also ask for your blessing upon those who are first responders in our fine community, the educators and citizens who make it up. We ask that your patience and fairness might be found by all, and we pray that the love and acceptance that we have and ourselves continue to receive from you might be shared with each who come into our community as we have had it shared with us. It is in your name that we pray. Amen.
Please remain standing for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Good evening. I hope everyone's doing well tonight. Before we get started, I wanted to congratulate the Johnstown Monroe School District for their passage of their levy. That was huge for them. And also to the local fire department for their passage of their levy. I believe these two things are very important for our city. We're going to move to action on minutes for March 7th.
Charlie Campbell.
Yes.
Nicole Shook.
Yes.
Bob Orsini.
Yes.
Don Merriman.
Yes.
Mayor Barnard.
Yes.
Brian Green.
Yes. There is a proclamation today for Arbor Day, and I will go ahead and read that. Whereas in 1872, the Nebraska Board of Agriculture established a special day to be set aside for the planting of trees, and whereas this holiday called Arbor Day was first observed with the planting of more than 1 million trees in Nebraska, and whereas Arbor Day is now observed throughout the nation and the world, and whereas trees can be a solution to combating climate change by reducing the erosion of our precious topsoil by wind and water, cutting heating and cooling costs, moderating the temperature, cleaning the air, producing light, and whereas trees, whenever they are planted, are a source of joy and spiritual renewal. Now therefore I, Donald Barnard, Mayor of the City of Johnstown, do hereby proclaim April 28, 2023 as Arbor Day. I urge all citizens to celebrate Arbor Day and to support efforts to protect our trees and woodlands. And just as a heads up on that, we will be planting a couple trees. I believe that's this Saturday over in the dog park, hopefully this Saturday.
A little wet still.
But there will be a couple trees added to the dog park for Arbor Day. Moving on to citizen comments on matters not on the agenda. Do we have anyone tonight? Teresa?
No one turned in any speaker slips, so I don't think so.
Anybody would like to speak tonight? For the regular meeting, their next meeting is May 9th at 6:30. Do you have anything for that, Mr. Green?
We had both of our meetings to discuss the planned development district that you guys will see later on here in the meeting.
Okay. Design Review Board, their next meeting is May 9th at 5 p.m. here in council chambers. Finance met today for a short meeting. Our next meeting is May 16th at 5 p.m. in the administrative conference room.
All different agenda items, one being speed limit, and another being loading zone, and we're going to continue conversation about that to make sure we're maximizing the safety of the folks in our city.
Awesome. Thank you, sir. Park and Rec, they met on May 1st. Do we have anyone that would like to speak about the Park and Rec?
We,
Yes, sir.
Sharon was not there, and we met and we discussed a few things. Nicole took notes, and so we talked about the Miles Estate, and we talked considerably about the amount of money that's been allocated for a water park, and then we also joined into the amphitheater that they might be there. Nothing was decided other than to take a look and see how long the money you have to keep the money and to what we have to do with it in order to keep it, okay?
Okay.
Like that there. Other than that, we had each of the groups from Johnstown Rexham Park, not from us, but the other group, and then from the Licking County, he gave us his report like that. And so When we talk about the Miles Estate, just real quickly, it's in the judge's hands and we're done. In other words, whenever the judge decides to hear it, right now she's really busy and she's told us that, or told the group that. And so when we'll get a judgment on that, we don't know.
Okay.
But that's where it's at. Other than that, that's all we had.
Okay.
You
The tree commission met on April 25th. Mr. Campbell, since you were there, would you like to give any updates on that, or is there anything to update?
Yeah, we decided to go ahead and plant more themselves, plus we might be able to put trees along the side, so that's been agreed to with them, this is when we get to it. And that's all we really had on trees.
Okay, thank you, sir. Economic development, do we have a meeting scheduled for them yet, Teresa?
We don't at this time.
He's on vacation this week, so I said I'd cover that. So just to hit the highlights here, John South just drilled J4 and it met all expectations. So that's very good. And another important thing, item 9, on April 18th, the water plant had their Ohio EPA lab survey. That's really important. The way the state does that is one fail, they all fail. So we had 7 people tested in the lab, all 7 passed, so that was really good. So we're up with our certifications with the state. Also, item number 11, we called in leak seekers to help identify a leak on Middleburn and where it was at exactly. And that leak should be repaired next Monday. I've got contractors lined up to come in and bore a new service under the road and repair versus digging up the road. So that's gonna happen, weather permitting, next Monday. If you go to the next page, all lab results are in order. If you'll notice, from around the 18th of the month on, lab results for water hardness got better. That's because all this testing and having to jump from well to well has been completed. And we're back on our 2 normal wells, and so the hardness is going back down to where we like to see it versus when we're using the 2 deeper wells. Training for the month on the next page was up 8.5 hours for continuing education on the licensed operators. And I will field any questions that anyone may have.
If you compare our water usage so far this year, especially the last 2 months, March and April, it's much lower than the last 2 years. Is there a reason for that?
Yes, it had just less usage right now.
Okay. Yes, sir.
When are they gonna be done with the other water tower?
Oh, okay, that was under my other report, but I'll jump into it right now. The big water tower, the sandblasting is done. The coatings have all been applied. Now we have to wait the recommended cure time. So we are hoping they're gonna send a representative out Friday to do what they call a rub test, to make sure underwater and some slight pressure that the coatings are dried and cured. If that is good on Friday, we will start filling the tower Monday. Now, they're gonna fill it with some chlorine to start with. We will only fill it 10%, let that chlorine dissolve, then fill it up over the rest of the week. Once that tower is full, we gotta let it sit for 24 hours, take bacteria tests out of it, make sure it meets all bacteriological results, and then we can turn it back on the system. So I am hoping a week from Monday, we'll have that back online. That's if all goes well.
It's a fun sound, the sandblasting.
Yeah. Inside.
Oh, inside would be awful,
Think about
outside.
the guys inside.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, it was tough. So in any event, I should have the full report on that in 2 weeks, the inspection report and the coatings report.
Cool, thank you.
Anyone else on council with questions? Okay, we're gonna move to the sewer, and if our service director for sewer could come speak.
Hi, Council.
Good evening.
For the month of April, we treated a total of 20.6 million gallons of wastewater. Plant efficiency charts, they all look great for the month, all at or above 98% removal rates. Moving on to work highlights here. We had 7 new build sewer inspections that we completed. Compressed a total of around 900,000 gallons of sludge for the month. Next item here, your very own Johnstown wastewater plant was chosen to be a participant in this year's plant tours hosted by the Southeast Ohio Water Environment Association. I happened to be out on vacation, but Jack and Logan led those tours for around 60 attendees, consisting of fellow operators, administrators, and engineers. So from the report I received, it was awesome.
Very well
turnout.
attended and a good program.
Good.
Next item, we installed UV bulbs. From May 1st to October 31st, we are required to kill E. coli in our treated wastewater before it enters into Raccoon Creek. This is done by ultraviolet light disinfection. So I have a picture there. You can see us hauling that rack with UV bulbs over to the channel for install. Moving on to training, Logan Drake, he attended a 6-hour training for his contact hours, for license renewal. Next page there, our second receiving station. We treated 1.4 million gallons there, and then as far as bulk water, we had around 80,000 for the month, so it'll be picking up here, May, June, July. Everybody filling their pools.
Yeah.
Any questions?
Mr. Mayor,
Yes, sir.
if we use less water, but we treat similar amounts, it doesn't seem like that gap's there. Is it just a function of the bar coating or how we're looking at it?
It's mainly rainwater, inflow,
That makes a lot of
infiltration
sense.
coming in. Yes.
One other thing is, so is it safe to assume that because we were chosen to be a tour site, that we're doing an exceptional job that others want to come see and emulate?
Oh, absolutely.
Congratulations.
Awesome. Any more questions? Great job with sewer. Thanks. Next is our street service director.
How are you guys?
Good, how are you?
Just start out here on miscellaneous. We continued on street light LED replacements. We did 2 this month. We had 1 street light repair that had blown fuses. We also did a traffic light, red light went out up at Wendy's. I did get word that the controller should be in mid-May to turn on the new lights. But that wasn't an exact date, he just gave an estimate. For street maintenance, we continued patching holes as needed, used a ton of cold mix. Down to water, we assisted in spreading of lime. Storm maintenance, we continued 625 feet of ditch cleaning. Park maintenance, started our season weekly mowing and trimming. And sewer maintenance, we helped in sludge hauling.
Does anyone in council have questions for Mr. Swick? Fair enough. Thank you, sir. Next on the agenda is, does our city manager have a report for us tonight?
Yes, to jump right into projects, as you
sorry.
all know, the new water tower is up and running, but the punch list still remains completed. I've already covered the maintenance on our existing 80-gallon tower. Again, hopefully in about 10 days, we'll have it up and back in full operation. Water plant update, there is a meeting with Jacobs Engineering scheduled for tomorrow to discuss final design options. And so we'll know more of the direction we're gonna go after that meeting. The wastewater plant update, RFQs have been received and they're being reviewed as we speak. An RFQ basically is just qualifications from different engineering firms to know who we want to work with on design and different ideas they have towards our design. The East Jersey project, the folks that live on this road know, unfortunately, we were cutting it down to its intended height as we were taking some of the hump and hill out of that to be able to better control the rainwater. Of course, as soon as they cut that road down, it started raining and hasn't stopped since. Very hard on the folks that are there, but I've got the contractors bringing in gravel and trying to keep the road passable until we can get in and get the final grades cut. And on the proof rolls on that, we had some very bad areas, which we knew. We knew they were gonna be bad. Part of the reason they're bad is just very bad soils. The other part of the reason is there was no storm sewer, which we have fixed that problem. We put storm sewers in that'll help drain that. So, again, if it quits raining, and I think it's supposed to here for a little bit, we'll be able to get back on there and continue to get that cut down to final grade. Item number 6, Pulte Housing Development. We haven't heard much on that punch list. We turned it into them quite a while ago. I think I'll make some calls towards the end of this week to see if they are working on that punch list at all, or if they're waiting on something. But there's a number of things that they need to get completed before they can turn any of those roads over to the city. Item 7, we're still waiting on, to see if we received the grant for the leak detection equipment. Are there any questions on those above projects?
That grant was 10,000, right?
Yes, it was 10,000.
Any other questions for Mr. Liggett? Thank you, sir. Now I'll turn it to the city manager.
In the effort of time, I'm gonna actually, with your permission, kick my report to next week. Part of that's because I've been desperately trying to squeak out some time to give you a full report. I've only got about half of it done, but we've got a pretty full list tonight, and I want to be sensitive to everyone's time. There are 2 or 3 items I do want to get to tonight. So if I can, just give you a quick update. AEP transmission line was held out at Northridge High School last night. Pretty good attendance. I think they had over 250 people. I attended that as a representative of Johnstown. If you have any questions, feel free to follow up. The basic extent is they've got the power generating up in Sunbury. They've got to get that line, transmission line, somehow down closer to the Green Chapel, Clover Valley area substation that they're going to create. They have to create a path for that. And so they're working with, obviously, a lot of property owners and discussing where and which way may be the most beneficial for that particular line. So that's about all of that. The other thing I wanted to bring to your attention, and I'm going to defer to Teresa on this, we've had some issues with our water billing system, and customers so far have been, I think, maybe unaware. So we haven't had a lot of phone calls yet, but we anticipate some of those phone calls coming in. We are not able to send out our bills as of yet. Typically, we've had those bills out, and at this point, I will stop, turn this over to Teresa. She will give you a little bit of background, and that way you can answer any questions, or if anybody's asking, you'll be able to have the information.
Just excuse me, the nutshell is that we use a third-party reader. We have MIUs on the outside of the houses. They send a read to our collectors. The collectors load into the Zenner system. They had a big malfunction in an upgrade that they were trying to do with their servers, and it's been about 3 weeks since we've been able to see a read. So they're working on it. You had an update today, if you want to.
Yeah, I spent about 45 minutes on the phone trying to get a hold of some people to give us a more direct answer. I got a call back at the end of the day saying that they believe they will have our reads in our system up by mid-morning tomorrow. Now, we have heard that, I think,
For a couple weeks.
for a couple weeks, but I did lean on them a little bit and got some response, so I'm hoping that is correct. If they aren't in by 10 o'clock tomorrow, I will get back on the phone and make more calls.
And per our ordinance, we have to have the bills out by the 10th, so we've got a little bit of time, but we are closing in on that window pretty quickly, and there's a little bit of work that has to be done prior to those bills getting submitted. But Teresa and Shelley have been working diligently, pulling their hair out, trying to figure this out. So typically the bills are out, so if there is a delay, your bill is not lost in the mail at this point. However, that probably does happen. So, but for this particular situation, they've not been mailed yet. So be patient. We will get those out. There will be only probably a 2-week window to get that paid. So there will be still sufficient time for someone to collect the bill from the city, get that bill paid and in prior to it being late. And we'll just keep you up to date on that situation. So.
Is the city making plans if it's not fixed by the 10th? Is that what we would do?
We've
You don't have
got a
to have an
couple-
answer, I was just curious if
Sure.
you're making
We've got a
notes.
couple different options that we are looking at. I don't want to go into those at this point because hopefully they're not going to be necessary. I don't think either option that we have is desirable. So pick your poison, one or the other, and there's consequences with each. So I think hopefully we'll be able to get where we need to be in the time that we need to be.
Okay, thank you.
Trying to think any other stuff. I'll hold off till next week's meeting unless anybody has a specific item or question that they have. I can try to answer now.
Okay. We will move forward with tabled legislation, the ordinance for 17-2022, the ordinance adopting wage and salary structures is still tabled at this time. Moving forward for public hearings of legislation, Resolution 2023-14, a resolution to appoint a city prosecutor for the balance of year 2023. You want me to give this to Chief Smart?
Absolutely.
Chief Smart, if you could talk about the city prosecutor.
So Prosecutor Mark Gardner just retired, and Jody Richter has been recommended by Mark, and other people recommended her as well. And we had to make a transition, and I wanted to have one prosecutor, not multiple prosecutors for Muni Court, Municipal Court, and Mayor's Court. Jody has been once a prosecutor and went to the dark side of defense and wants to get back into being a prosecutor. And I think that she'll be a good fit for us.
And with this, because Mr. Gardner had been doing it for so long, very affordable, but with moving this will go up a little bit, correct?
It will, without saying the numbers publicly, it'll be about 0.25% more than what we were paying Mr. Gardner, which he recommended an amount of which he would have probably, or should have, charged the city anyway. And that's the number that Jody came in at as well.
Okay.
He stated that he should have been charging us more, but he's worked so long with us, he didn't want to do it in the last final years of his tenure.
Does anyone on the council have any questions about this, this choice? Hearing none, this will be introduction, public hearing, and vote. Do I have any public hearing on this item? Hearing none, we will move forward. Do I have a motion to move this forward?
So moved.
I'll second.
Charlie Campbell,
Yes.
Nicole Schiff,
Yes.
Bob Orsini,
Yes.
Ron Meredith,
Yes.
Mayor Barnard,
Yes.
Ryan Green.
Yes. Great. We have a new prosecutor. Okay, the next item is introduction of legislation. This will only be introduction. It is ordinance 07-2023, an ordinance established in chapter 1164 of the City of Johnstown Codified Ordinances. This would be the new PD district. I've talked to Mr. Orsini about this. We're going to go ahead and take away the normal council rules on how we interact, so we can have more fluid conversation with this item, and that way we don't have to have more formal speech on this. So we're going to ahead and move forward on discussion on this. Feel free to chime in when you'd like. Just don't try to talk over each other, so. Sean, would you like to bring this up now?
Sure. Okay, I'm going to try to delay a little bit, only because we have Thad, our attorney, that's been working with us. He is en route, so he should be here at any moment. And we also have Trevor with MKSK, who is present, but Chris will also be joining us tonight. So I don't know if it would be prudent to.
Okay.
I'm going to make a motion to amend the agenda.
I make a motion that we amend the agenda to move other business forward in front of introduction of legislation so that we can wait for the appropriate personnel to get here.
Second.
Are all in favor?
Yes.
Aye.
Okay, I've got at least one piece of other business I'd like to bring up. I think all on council have seen on the highway when you're traveling, adopt a highway, like you're adopting a mile to take care of that. I think because of the position we're in, a leadership position within the city, I would like to see if council would be interested in adopting the downtown district of our town. And we get together once a month, once every 6 weeks, and we pick up trash. I think it'd be a great example for the children of our community and the other citizens of the community to see citizens caring enough to pick up the trash in the area, keep our downtown looking nice. Circle K all the way over to where the downtown area ends. We could go further, maybe to College, to a little bit further heading west, whatever we deem appropriate. Maybe the alleyways, walking through there, cleaning those up.
Do the park yard and everything like that?
Yeah. I just think if we could clean that up, maybe it'd get other citizens interested in trying to keep downtown Johnstown and other areas beautiful, so.
When would you want to commence doing it?
I could get a schedule sent out to everybody, see when they'd want to do it. Maybe here in a couple weeks, get started. Just a Saturday morning or Saturday afternoon, we just get together and clean up.
Sure.
That works.
Yeah, sounds a good idea.
It'd be informal, no decisions would be made, no. Talking about business, is that allowable? Okay. So that's all I had for other business.
And if you want, we can move to item 15. With that one, we do not, correct me if I'm wrong, Teresa. Item 15, we do not need our attorney present, but we do have him calling in, and he's on call at any time we want to. 7:15, but y'all are on a mission, which I appreciate, but I did not anticipate that. So trying to juggle the agenda a little bit. If you want to bring item 15 up, I can get on the phone with the HR attorney. We can hash that out. Shouldn't take more than 15 minutes. It's really just an update, and then we can come back in.
Okay.
That's up to you.
I move that we go to executive session to consider the compensation of a public employee. Only people to be required are the council and the city manager, and our attorney when he calls them.
Great. And we'll go over the next
Hold
one.
on, hold on.
Do we have to amend the agenda again first?
Amend the agenda.
Well, okay, so you're only making the motion for the one executive session.
Yep.
You're going to come back.
Yeah.
regular
Yes.
Session before you make another emotion. Nicole Ship,
Yes.
Robert Keating.
Yes?
John Merriman.
Yes.
Mayor Barner.
Yes.
Brian Green.
Yes.
Charlie Campbell.
Yes.
We'll be back about 15 minutes.
Hopefully. Calling them?
That'd be really fun.
You are back.
Okay. There was no action taken in that executive session. We are now moving on to introduction of legislation, item number 12 on the agenda. You good now?
Do we have to come back in to, do we have to say we're coming back into regular? Okay.
Good question, though, because that is a common question. It feels like you should, but you don't have to, which is
Okay.
weird.
Just wanted to make sure.
Do we have the
Dot the i's,
participants now?
crossing the t's.
What's that?
We have the participants for number 12?
We're at about 75% strength. We got one more, but I think we can get started on it.
Okay.
Because what I'm first going to do is maybe open up for questions that you all have. And I've got Thad here, who is my awesome note taker, and then he translates everything you say and then throws it back into a document and that beautiful legalese that exists in our codified ordinances. So it's more selfish to wait till he got here than anything else. So
Okay, so we're going to move forward to ordinance 07-2023, ordinance establishing chapter 1164 of the City of Johnstown's codified ordinances, and it's all yours.
All right. So really quickly, and Chris is probably going to come in and do the same thing, but I will try to play Chris. Or Trevor, if you want to introduce what we're doing here, but I'll give you real quick. We're having a new district be introduced to the City of Johnstown. So right now, we have single-family planned unit development that's on the books, but we don't really have something that's going to work for a lot of what we're doing moving forward. We don't have a lot of time to create an individualized code for each thing, so this is kind of a really good legal counsel, and we put together a document. It went to zoning. Zoning looked at it very expedited, which I appreciate. I know it was a lot on them to get through in a short period of time, and they had a lot of comments that they wanted to put into it, a lot of good comments, a lot of good questions. Some of them just needed an explanation as to why it was in there. Some of them were really great recommendations that maybe got missed or gave a little flavor of Johnstown and their stamp on it. So taking all those documents and all those recommendations and compiled them. I will say this document is probably 95 or 90% done at this point. I know MKSK, Thad have looked at it and noticed some areas that we may want to have some discussion on, and I'll let those individuals speak on those. And at this point, I'll kick it over to Trevor if you want.
Sure. You mind if I kind of plug in?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah. Move this over here.
You can set that over.
There's another table that pops out here.
Oh.
I have to move that stand over. Yeah. It's not very long on that.
Probably not.
Yeah. Golly. Let me stretch it out somewhere. Yep.
It takes a second. Unless the cord is loose, then you have to.
Longer than a second.
There it goes.
She does. Tap it on the left side 3 times.
Okay, so first, thank you all for your time. I'm Trevor Trouthagen. I'm with MKSK. We've been engaged by the city to update the city's comprehensive plan, but as part of that, we've also been asked to look at the planned development district. And so to kind of give a little bit of a background, I'm not going to go through all the history of the comp plan, what we've done. But kind of to summarize the kind of rationale and the need for this planned development is really to respond to, as you all are well aware, the kind of immediate and mounting pressure for development just in this part of the world, with Intel being announced, and all the secondary uses that come along with that. That development will inevitably come to Johnstown, and we want to make sure that you all have the tools that you need to be prepared to have the conversations with developers and other interested landowners that will probably be knocking on your door here very soon if they aren't already doing so. And so one of those steps, one of our recommendations is to implement what we're calling a planned development tool. The city already has a planned unit development, but it really isn't the scale and caliber to accommodate the types and variety of uses that will be within these developments that are likely to come before you. And so what we are proposing is a process along with some guidelines that allow you to have a conversation with developers, but don't necessarily have a standard zoning district for those to fall into. So as we've discussed with you all before, the city's current zoning code is pretty old. It doesn't really contemplate the type of development that really occurs today, regardless of the intel development. And so it's not appropriate at this time necessarily to update your entire zoning code. That's a process that takes it to be done correctly, probably a couple of years, and is somewhat, it's very labor intensive. And so we wanted to have an interim tool that allowed you all to have these conversations and capitalize on the opportunity before you without, just relying on the tools that you currently have. Part of this also is to adequately distribute the limited water and sewer capacity that the city has. Obviously, Mr. Leggett was just talking about another well that was drilled. That's great. The city's pursuing water expansions, but a lot of these developments, especially the industrial users similar to Intel, need a lot of water just to operate. And so we want to make sure that you all have the tools you need, again, to make those decisions of where the resources that you have will be directed. And then, of course, the last thing that we have here in terms of first steps are, pursue and leverage your regional partnerships. So you don't have to do this all on your own. There are other groups out there or entities that will be partners throughout this entire process. And so this moves into why a planned development. Again, I just referenced a few of these things, but really the focus of a planned development is limited to properties being annexed into the city. This is not intended to be applied for any property currently within the city limits. This is really focusing on outward expansion, again, to allow those conversations to occur around facility expansions and any other type of capital investments the city would be doing, and allow you all to take a careful look at those with a high level of detail. That leads into the second bullet point there of focusing on master plan development. So not allowing things necessarily just to happen piecemeal as property owners decide to sell, and really having a holistic view of these expansions as they occur. And I'll get into the detail of what that means with a master plan development in a minute. And really, again, and I'm gonna say this a lot, in control where utility expansions and where the city grows. So it no longer will just be up to individual property owners kind of selling things off as they wish. It will be a large group of properties or a large property that is brought in under one ownership group. They'll have a plan that illustrates all of the uses they would like to see on that property, and they will also have a zoning text that supports that. And so it will more or less be a zoning code in itself for these individual developments. And one of the benefits of these processes, of this plan development process, is that it creates development patterns that exceed what your current code allows for. And so you'll allow for a better mix of uses. You as council and planning and zoning commission as well will have the ability to review architectural styles, the overall layout and form of these developments, and really put your input to make sure that any new development that is proposed really meets the goals of the community. Before I move on to what are the components, does anyone have any questions thus far? So, what is a planned development? Really, at the end of the day, it is simply a process to review an entitled development. It's not a zoning district. It won't be proactively applied to any properties. A property owner or group of owners will have to come to you and request this planned development. And so it's not your typical zoning district where when you annex a property, it goes into an agricultural zoning or something of that nature. It really is it's a custom tailored development regulation for a specific piece of property. And the parts of that, and so that gets in the second point there with a master plan that regulates development. This isn't applied parcel by parcel, and that master plan will govern how things are arranged, how they look, and those sorts of things. And really, the difference between this process and a standard zoning process is really the responsibility of the applicant or developer is much higher in this scenario than under a typical zoning district. So when an application comes in, there will be, as I noted, a master plan, and that will actually be it will look kind of like engineering plans, but large format plots that show road alignments and any utility needs, where uses will generally go. and buffers, those sorts of things. So it'll be visual for you all to see, and then that will be supported by the zoning text, which is basically a written document that supports and goes along with that master plan. And so some of the things that you see there on the right-hand side of the screen, those are the some of the standards and some of the components that will be required just for an application. So currently as written, the PD requires a minimum of 350 acres to even qualify for the plan development process. And so that's kind of setting the bar for to limit the number of these requests that you get, because they are intensive to review for, not only for your staff, but for you all as well. And also, that just allows for, again, a better holistic view to be taken as the city expands its municipal boundaries. The three pieces that you see there in the middle, the fiscal impact statement, the utility impact statement, and the transportation impact study, those are all components or documents that will be submitted, created by the developer or applicant, and then submitted for review as part of this. So we felt that as part of this process, there should be a trade-off with kind of the freedom that the PD allows for the development community, in that making sure that the city is going to fiscally benefit from this, and that the development that happens is additive in nature, and you all are, see an increase in revenue based on these new developments that come in. So that would be something that's required for the developer to submit and be reviewed by your staff and you all as well, to make sure that that's occurring. Utility impact statement, that gets back to the first point I was making earlier of making sure that your expansions or utility systems are carefully calculated, and make sure that you all can serve them. And so that utility impact study will include things such as demand numbers, estimated demand for water and sewer, number of vehicle trips, which is included in the transportation impact study. So you really get a good, clear picture of a lot of different pieces and parts just from the application itself for you all to review. And then there are the last item there are a series of review criteria that are in the document as well that planning and zoning and you all can use to review these applications to make sure that, again, that the development that is proposed meets the goals of the city itself. And so moving from kind of the why and the what is into the review process itself. And the way that this document is written and set up is that there are multiple review opportunities. There's a conceptual plan, which is kind of an entry checkpoint almost. An applicant can come in and submit an application, but before it's even considered complete or can be considered for public hearing, that plan has to be complete, meaning that the staff can take a look at, is everything that's required, has it been submitted? Is it reasonably within the realm of what the city wants? And then if that's the case, that moves forward to, and correct me if I'm wrong, Chris, that moves along to Planning and Zoning Commission and City Council for their review as well. And that's just an entry checkpoint basically that for everyone to get a kind of a first glance, make sure that things are on the right track before the preliminary development plan is pursued. And the reason for that is the preliminary development plan is a very, very detailed exercise on the applicant's part, meaning they will have to have an engineer on board to produce the master plan documents. They will likely have to have legal representation to prepare their zoning text. And that's where really kind of the details really start coming to the forefront. And that preliminary development plan is also brought back before Planning and Zoning Commission and City Council with a staff recommendation. And so the diagram that you see there on the right-hand side, those two documents, the zoning text and the development plan, go through staff, P&Z, and City Council for the first two items. And then the final development plan really is kind of making sure that all the fine-grained details match the preliminary development plan. So if you're equating this to more like a subdivision plan or something like that, your concept plan is maybe like a 60% design. You know generally where things are going to go, how they're going to look, but you want to make sure you're on the right track before you really invest in that next step. The preliminary development plan would really be more like 90% plans. There's a lot of detail there. There's a lot of numbers, very, very fine-grained detail. And then the final development plan is making any final tweaks to make sure that all the development works. And really, there should be no major differences between the two. The documents themselves will look very, very similar in nature and content. And so the bottom part on the left there, the development plan, again, that's an illustrative document. That's intended to be images and plans and things like that that are all visual in nature, and then they are supported by the zoning text. So if you think of the development plan, it might tell you where buildings are gonna go. The zoning text will tell you what can be in those buildings and how they have to look and those sorts of things. Chris?
Hi. Hello, everyone. Chris Irvin, Principal on KSK. Sorry I'm late. I just want to, Trevor's doing a good job. I just want to add here, you keep going. I just want to add here that the preliminary development plan, that step number 2, when it gets through to you, if you say yes, that's when the zoning changes. So the trigger of the zoning is at the end of step 2. So at step 1, the developer is coming in, developer landowner is coming in, concept plan, having a meeting with you and saying, here's what we're thinking. And we've already talked to staff, hopefully gotten some direction, so we want to share, this is the direction we're thinking, these are the kinds of things we'd like to do. And then you're not taking a vote, you're not approving anything, you are just saying, here's our reaction, here's our guidance. Nothing you say are you obligated to, obviously they can come back and submit whatever, but it's a good, like, all right, let's see where everybody's at and get together on the board before the landowner developer spends a lot of money doing the preliminary development plan application. And then step 2, they come in, submit, staff reviews and says, is this complete or not? There's probably maybe some things missing or incomplete, they have to fill those in. When it feels like it's ready, it's submitted to the planning commission. Planning commission gets it, they get to review it, they spend time, they may have questions, they can table it, they can ask more information, but ultimately they make a recommendation to you, either a recommendation to approve with conditions, or a recommendation for denial. And all that gets to you, and you get that same presentation, and then ultimately then it's up to you to say, approve with conditions, or deny. But should you approve or approve with conditions, at that second step, that is now the zoning text and zoning document that controls what happens on that area of land. And then, we've got 3 years in there now, is that what we had? They have 3 years to come in and start the project. They're going through all this expense, they're gonna start it. Often, the size we're talking about will probably be a phased approach. And they'll probably talk about that in the preliminary development plan. They'll bring in a phase 1. And it will be very it'll be the final plans. It'll be like, here's the curb, here's the exact location of the curbs and the water and the sewer and all that kind of stuff. Easements, everything. And it, right now it's set up to come to you, and then you check to make sure it matches what's in the preliminary development plan, and basically if it matches, you say yes, or if there's some things you need to get clarified, But then when that's done, then they can go for building permits on that phase 1. If it is a major economic development project that takes up a large bit of the land or all the land, that might come back as one thing. And so there would be phases. That's possible. So yeah, get back in.
Sure. So really, that's kind of that's basically the process of how one of these would be reviewed, and feel free to jump in if you have questions. But basically, the last slides we wanted to go through before we kind of get into the discussion in the weeds a little bit is just the overall contents of this planned development district. I mentioned earlier this is each one of these projects will basically be their own zoning district, and this code, this document that's in front of you establishes all of the various components of the review process itself, what has to be submitted, again, what you all should review these requests based on, that sort of thing. The submission requirements, let's see, and then any parkland requirements will be in there as well. So there will be an open space component as part of this. Any one of these planned developments, and I think that's really about it. I don't want to go through all those and bore you all with those details, but that's really what we wanted to give you all as a baseline, and we're happy to answer any questions that you have.
Just one last thing to add. Also want to make it clear, I mean, at the scale we're talking about, the 350 acres, we're really talking about land that is not in Johnstown today, or someone is asking to be annexed, which would be a separate thing that you all would have to hear first, and have to talk about providing sewer services, water, sewer, and all that kind of stuff. And then they would come in and then go through this rezoning process. But also want to make it clear, because we had a good discussion with the Planning and Zoning Commission, this does not stop an adjacent property owner that has less than 350 acres asking to annex to Johnstown and coming before you and rezoning to any of the other districts that are already in your code. They can come in and rezone to some of the other districts. So this isn't trying to prevent other people from doing things. It's really trying to set the stage for larger developments and really trying to encourage, you know, a significant investment and something that helps the fiscal base of Johnstown.
With that, what you're saying, it doesn't stop others, but if someone wanted to come in with, say, 50 acres or 100 acres, they're going to come in a different zoning.
They would come in asking for, first there'd be an annexation agreement, and you all have to approve the annexation, and then there would be discussion after that about coming into what zoning. I should know this, but I
No.
assume it comes in as
Agricultural. I was going to mention that as well. This doesn't restrict the annexation of others from coming in to the city of Johnstown, and this got discussed a little bit in the planning and zoning discussion. So the applicant would say, we want to come in, typically my recommendation is come in as agricultural, then from there, they would reapply for a map amendment to be one of the districts that currently exist, and then council would have to make a decision whether they felt that that was the appropriate zoning for that particular district, and they could approve that or deny that. And the applicant could probably hinge the annexation upon that. More than likely, that's what they would do, and if they decided no, then the annexation process would not move forward any longer. Or if they did, and they wanted to come in as agricultural. So a good example, I think Ryan mentioned at the zoning meeting, was an individual with 5 acres that their well goes out or have septic issues that wants to be able to come into Johnstown. Agricultural zoning district would probably be sufficient for that. That meets the qualifications of our agricultural zoning district. That doesn't allow for any expansive use of that particular property, just brings it into the city, allows them to be annexed, and then we can obviously service them with water and sewer if that is the desire of council, so.
Okay, thank you.
Help.
So with that, questions?
we assume you have a lot, and we're happy to keep going. You just want to prevent all night, and then you go fall asleep.
Does anybody have questions for him right now?
I've got a couple questions, Ms. Mayor, if I could.
Yes.
First would be for Ryan, just so I better understand. I read through the PUD documents. I am not an expert on our current zoning. Are there substantial deviations from our zoning that provide an advantage to someone that comes in through a PUD other than time versus, say, another landowner that would have 50 acres? What I want to do is make sure that this action is to allow expedition of our processes, but we will have the ability ultimately to level off through our normal zoning code someone that, I don't want to put someone at an advantage by being big enough to be a PUD and someone that just doesn't meet that threshold to be at a disadvantage.
Yeah, no, I agree with you, and that's something we talked a lot about. This is obviously going to be new zoning. It's going to have a lot of options. The PUD is very popular with developers in general right now, no matter what you're developing, whether it's residential, and we've talked about that for a couple of years now. PUD, I think, first came to us, and it was something that we looked at just for housing developments. And I think that's kind of what's in our zoning right now, because a lot of developers want leeway to bring in something, be more creative, and not get kind of painted into a corner. That's kind of what this does. I think one of the major components of this too is it allows you to operate more. I think John said this before, like it allows you to operate more at the speed of business and less at the speed of typical government. So I think it does fast track some things.
I guess to boil my question down into a nutshell, I wouldn't want to see a landowner of 125 acres at some point that is either congruent or contiguous with a PUD district to not have those same advantages potentially to operate under current zoning.
Hold on. This is the PD district, which is different than the PUD district,
Yes.
which would still exist.
I'm sorry.
Right.
I was using the wrong term.
Because if you came in at 150, yeah.
PD district.
It's
I was referencing-
confusing.
when I was-
Because
when I
you're
was
like
saying
PD, PUD.
When I was saying
and
PUD,
a lot
I
of
was
acronyms.
referencing PD. in my mind.
Yeah,
I knew
get
what you meant, Paul.
Yeah, nope, I understood for sure.
I don't want 10-acre plots coming in because
Right.
of what's involved, but of course I wouldn't want to see a landowner that has some land, typically a
Yeah.
private landowner, being forced to sell to get big enough to therefore have access to the benefits of someone that has the three.
So it was something that we brought up, and I mean, this was something that I said, you know, as a realtor, if I come in and I want to take advantage of something like this, I come in and I have a 50-acre parcel, I'm going to call the other realtors in the area and say, hey, you know, can we bring this together? You know, there's all kinds of ways to work around this, but I think you'll see as you go through this too. It was something that zoning wanted to see. We did include a lot of, you know, code citing in here. So there is going to be a lot of our current code that makes it through. I think as, you know, as you hear something, the group that would hear these types of things, there's going to be a lot of our current code that makes it through into this. And as we update that code, you know, this is a living document, so we can amend this too to try to help and, you know, make sure that everything's done the right way. It was something that I was worried about too. If you leave too much ambiguity and you allow for too much creativity, sometimes you don't get a great product depending on who's on your board. And you know, as we've seen, it's, you know, it's hard to get people sometimes. So
My interest is to try to keep it as level playing field as we can within reason.
right.
Could I take a crack, if I may?
Go ahead.
At answering I think what you're scratching the surface on, Bob, and correct me if I'm misinterpreting, is the specific 350 acre requirement.
Yeah, that's it, because 350 acres makes sense under the current situation and our ability to respond to things. But moving forward, I'd like to see there to be flexibility within reason.
Right. So I'll take a quick crack, and then I'm going to actually kick it back to Chris and Trevor and Thad as well. So specifically that 350, that is something that we can start off with right now. And then over time, we can obviously alter that requirement. There has been a lot of discussion about that 350 mark, working through that with MKSK and our legal counsel, and just through conversations that I've given them. And I'll give you from the city perspective, from what I've had firsthand experience on, and then they can give you probably from a historical background, from a planning background, but I'm going to give you a boots on the ground situation, and that is, I have a big concern that if that acreage is lessened, there's the old saying, bolt the door, very real. I am concerned that we are going to have a tremendous amount of applicants coming our way, and because of the bandwidth that we currently have, we don't have the ability to be able to do these individual parcels properly to where you're going to get a good result. The other thing I want to point to is this is going to, in my opinion, really define Johnstown as a master planning community versus a parcel by parcel, 50 acre, 100 acre, another 50 acre. What this allows to do is allows you to really think about your roadway systems. So you're having a large area of land that then opens itself up to having a roadway system within it, rather than just one access point off of 62 or one access point off of Concord or whatever the case may be. So it allows you to better utilize your utilities and your infrastructure. And the other infrastructure piece that I want to talk about is that water and sewer. The water and sewer that we're looking at, we need to be very strategic in the water that we're going to be using. Every drop of water we need to make sure is going to have a return investment on the city of Johnstown from a positive financial impact. And I would love to lean more into the economic development, employment centers. I think you're going to get hit with a tremendous amount of residential applicants. And if you're having 50 acre, 100 acre, you're going to be flooded with those applicants. Not that you have to say yes to those applicants, but just from a sheer filtering process, I'm the only filter you have right now. I will be fielding calls 24/7, and it will not be productive for the city at this point. Already had a tremendous amount of calls. So the 350, what it does is it allows us to really slow this process down a little bit, to only take big chunks so that we can really look at this, not inundated with 8 different applications, but more than likely 1, maybe 2, be able to do this properly. And I think that's what everybody in this town is really looking at. There's the growth that's on the horizon, but we want to be able to do this in a quality way that doesn't make people feel like they're losing the identity of Johnstown, doesn't feel like they're losing their quality of life. And this is the reason that I've heard that we're doing this. And this is not necessarily most common practice, but it's not it's not out of practice either. And at that point, I'm gonna kick it over to Trevor and Kyle and Pat.
I
Chris.
definitely think you said it better than I could. That was exactly right on. The only other piece I would add is, part of the reason we're doing this is to get something on the books now, so you're ready, and to encourage the economic employment side of development to happen, because that's really important to the community, I think, right now. First, residential will come, but we can get to that. You all know, you told us that we've got to update the zoning code, it's true, it needs to be updated, but that is a very long, it is more than a year, closer to 2-year process to really overhaul a zoning code. And we all felt you didn't have that time, both in terms of missing out on potential economic development projects that you could really, I think, benefit from, and just in terms of interest in Johnston, Good, so this gives us a chance to respond to that, get that, and then we are gonna work on the zoning code, and we will make things possible. We'll be in a better position to respond to some of these other size of developments. It's not that it'll be 350 forever. I think we'll get to the code, we'll work on it.
To give you some perspective on that 350 though, anytime I see a number or anything, and these guys can tell you, any number I saw on that was, well, how'd we get that number? Why is it that number? Where are we at? So I can tell you that, but most neighborhoods that come in, about 350 houses, if it's, I know we're gonna focus on the economic side, but just to give you some perspective, if you have a neighborhood that comes in 350 houses, that can be 100 acres. So, if you have Kroger or something like that, you're looking at 100 acres. 350 gives you a pretty sizable process. You'll see with square footage later on in here too, that was a question that I had. Look at Kroger, that's 150,000 square feet, and Amazon Fulfillment Center is 800,000 square feet and up. So those are all things that we looked at perspective wise to kind of give you some size. And then when you take a step back and look at, like Sean said, what the overall goal is, when you start looking at those numbers and seeing similar projects, that's what we're going for. So, and those numbers, if you guys deem that we need to change them, we can change them. So they're just parameters.
Your explanations were
Gives you-
clear?
Gives you a chance to build a brand.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Gives us a chance, large swaths will give us a chance to start. We've had this conversation once, but it'll give us a chance to start building a brand or an image or whatever you want to relate the word to, because when you go back to the end of the day, everybody always says, we just want Johnstown. We have to define what Johnstown is. It has to have, I don't think anybody, for the most part, could sit down and say, this is Johnstown, right? We're going to give like generalized statements, but you're not going to say, and then, it would be nice to have a contiguous, not necessarily uniform look, but something that all flows well together, and you don't drive down the road and you're like, they put that building in 97, and then we went over here in 2020, and then we went back,
Green space is another big component of that. If you have 10, 50 acre parcels that have little 5 acre pieces of green space incorporated with the plan, that's great. But if you have 350 acres, you can combine all of that into one and get you a wonderful, 40 acre green space that's really usable by the entirety of it. So there's a big difference in my mind between a master planning large parcel versus the smaller. And you can do the smaller, but we just don't have the staff. We don't have the ability at this point to do the work on ourselves to link all of these smaller parcels together. It's very complex. It's very tedious. It takes a tremendous amount of time. Mr. Mayor, I don't know, we did have 2 P&Z members in the audience. If you want to ask for their input. Jesse left. I don't know if he's coming back, but we still have one. Before he leaves, I didn't know if you wanted to have any input from him.
No, I would
from
love,
questions.
I love the discussion. Any more discussion we can have? Mr. Lee, do you have anything you'd like to share?
Yeah, just to Bob's question, because to weigh in additional context of what's been discussed is accurate. We weighed pretty heavily on the 350 and that number. We talked about going lower. We weighed very heavily Sean's comment about what that watermark should be relative to his current knowledge of questions that he's getting directly.
Daily.
And what that means with respect to his workload and everything like that. And we also know, and looking at the auditor's site, there's really only one contiguous parcel to the city that meets or exceeds that 350 acres. And that, to Ryan's point, you'd probably have to have multiple come in at the same time, like we've seen which before was never, I don't think, really on many people's radars. You're gonna have multiple massive landowners come in at once for a massive project, something like that. To that end, too, we talked about the 350 accommodating both residential and commercial, and making sure that it's large enough to scale something that from a financial impact statement makes sense for the village to entertain. And so we start on a larger scale, and it gives you that scope to be able to apply, especially for maybe the first couple in a test environment at the very least. But also, and correct me if I'm wrong, because you talked about this, but I want to make sure I'm right. When you mentioned the level playing field with those that have smaller parcels, 5, 10, 15, 50 acres, as the PD process starts, they are able to annex in and buy into that PD development, but then they would be subject to the zoning text that's been adopted.
Become partners with the original developer, right?
Yeah,
So
you
if
would
you
have
have-
to
If you
be
have
a
a
part of the
400
original
acre
development.
parcel that has been designated as a PD district, you don't necessarily have to have another 350 plus acre parcel developed right next to
Yeah,
it. If the
right.
zoning text is applicable and agreeable to that landowner who's adjacent, they can come in at that same level essentially and be a part.
So are you saying like at a later time?
Correct.
So somebody's done a 350.
Yeah, so-
Or plus, development, a PD district, right? And then this guy over here is like, I've got 125 acres and I want to piggyback off the PD. That can be done, correct?
It's what they called it
clarify,
during our
that-
meeting was
that grab it.
the missing teeth, is what was
Yeah.
called, and up to half a mile.
Well, and
You can kind of add in later on.
I'll jump in and then I'm going to kick to Thad. A lot of that wording was put in there for the specific purpose of if you have a piece of land that comes in and it's a lot of different parcels, that same owner that's doing the initial would be able to procure the other pieces. And as Ryan said, the missing teeth scenario, that way it completes the square, so to speak. So that's probably really what that's intended for. I don't want to have a misconception that someone outside of the original owner, without the owner's consent, could just automatically piggyback in. The original applicant would have to say, yes, they would have to meet the measure. Go ahead, Thad.
They would have to, the way this is written, they would have to enter into some arrangement where there's common ownership or control
Okay.
for the smaller pieces with the larger 350 contiguous.
Even if it's later on in the project.
Even if it's later on in the project. But, the other thing to remember, and Chris or Trevor, I think, brought this up earlier, is that, we're not going to carve this or whatever
Yeah.
is ultimately adopted in stone. So as the city's capabilities develop and as, the environment around the city develops, you may come back in 6 months' time, a year's time, and say 350 is not what we need to have anymore. Maybe 200 makes
Okay.
sense. Maybe, some other exceptions make sense. So
Great
you can always kind of ratchet it down
Okay.
as circumstances warrant.
And I will add, for any of those, any additional properties that wanted to come in, let's say that the original PD had been approved, and then the original owner agrees to expand that district, that would be considered an amendment, which would also have to go basically back to the initial process. So you all would get to see that expansion, what it looks like. It's not just, I, the property owner, agree with the applicant next door, and so I want to jump on. They have to actually amend their master plan so that you all, again, get a chance to review where are roads going, where are parks going, where,
Okay.
So it's not just they tack on and they can just start doing whatever they want.
So that person that's per that 125 acres or whatever would have to be purchased by?
Not necessarily
Okay.
purchased by, but they would have to agree to some sort of common ownership structure with the.
That's an
initial
agreement between the two of them, correct? That would not
Common
encompass us.
ownership or development rights.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay.
Other than a couple properties, these are going to be ownership groups. I mean, it seems that way. There's a couple very large properties that will probably come in this way, but overall, I mean, it's going to have to be groups of individuals that have to cobble this together somehow with whatever agreements they come up with.
and I think this has kind of been stated in several different ways, but I just wanted to summarize very quickly that the plan development is just a new tool in your all's toolbox. It's not taking away anything else that you currently have. So in terms of, not creating an uneven playing field, the tools that are available today to any property owner will still be available if this is adopted. This is just another option that can be utilized, again, if that bar of entry can be met.
But we've said before, but I'll just restate it one more time, also for people listening, that, Intel's coming, lots of places are gonna benefit from the income tax and the other stuff that happens, but it's not in Johnstown. And so, this is a way of trying to get people serious about economic development that helps Johnstown, and bringing in a large parcel as a way of showing that, and also helping you all make decisions on water and sewer, which is gonna be a resource that you have a certain limited amount of supply, at least early on, and will require resources to extend. And so this is kind of saying, if you're serious, we're serious, but show us that you're serious, and bring enough in to make this worthwhile. That'll help us guide our decisions on infrastructure.
Perfect. Is there anything else that council wants to, do you guys have more to present?
Other than answering questions,
And we'll have an addition, this is just an introduction tonight. So don't feel like you got to cram for the test and we're gonna have a pop quiz at the end of this. You've got some time. You've got another 2 weeks before another reading. We'll have a public comment at that point. We'll hear some public comments, and there's been some feedback that we've heard from the zoning commission that obviously when you're having a conversation, you grasp what the group is saying, but you want to interpret it correctly. I think there's a couple areas in there that we're still trying to wordsmith properly. So you may see a little bit of tweaks to this in some specific areas. And if you've read through it, you can kind of see where there's been statements crossed out and then some feedback. And so don't be surprised if there's edits. We'll obviously point those out ahead of time. But I just want to let you know, this isn't a rush situation. But obviously, there is opportunity very near on the horizon. That's one of the reasons we did this expedited piece of the comprehensive plan for a specific area. There's a lot of opportunity right there. It's literally right across the street from Intel. There are secondary suppliers that have to be in certain proximity to Intel per their contract. So we're hoping to, as Chris mentioned, capture some of that opportunity that we weren't a part of from the onset, and by getting that economic development, it will help unburden the residents through their taxes that they pay individually, put that more on the businesses, and over the long term, 15 years, it will have an impact on our roadway system, our park systems, our police, everything that we do. We're going to have the ability financially to really do things better than what we've done before. So that's a key component. And I say 10 to 15 years because I don't want anybody to have these grand expectations that as soon as this goes in, we all of a sudden are going to be able to start paving every street and completely remodel everything. This is a process. And if you're asking my opinion, you need to roll that investment that you're going to get back into the investment to start to create a machine which will help produce more income over the long term, and then pick up some of those awesome fun projects that really give Johnstown its identity, capture the flavor and that you've seen from other successful communities. Not saying we can't have some fun at the beginning, but we're gonna have to work first, and then I think we'll be able to play a little bit later. So I've heard everyone have these ideas about how soon, and I just want to make sure that we have the right context. It's not gonna happen tomorrow, but I think if we do things right, there's a lot of opportunity for Ryan to get a splash pad.
It's coming.
So,
it's going to happen.
It's going to happen.
It's going to happen.
And not only a splash pad, but a lot of other amenities that are going to raise the quality of life in Johnstown. But we've got to do it correctly, and we want to make sure that we're investing what we have towards the things that are going to give us the biggest return on our investment. So.
Feel free to take some time with this document for sure. I mean, we did, the first session was 2 to 3 hours. I think at zoning, we did a special meeting. The second one was about 4.5 hours that we took with it. in the second zoning meeting. So, yeah, feel free to take some time with it because we definitely did.
Are there any other comments or questions from council on this?
Do we want to make any edits?
Good.
And if you do, email them to me, or email them to Chris, Thad, anybody on, consider this to be the staff that exist. Email them to us, and we can either A, respond to a question, or B, bring that recommendation forth for the rest of the body to have that conversation and to weigh in on it, and then get feedback from you all, whether you want us to change it completely, change it minor, or completely be done with the conversation, so.
I think it's important to know, a lot of people know that the development's coming, and it's coming Johnstown's way. And this document here is the most important right now for us to make sure that we do it the right way, that we get the right look for Johnstown. We keep the natural feel to Johnstown, but we also bring in businesses. And this document is vital to that, and is very important to that. So having council look over it, I appreciate zoning, planning and zoning, taking so much time to go through it, and I really appreciate all the work that you all have done to get us this document and get us in a place where we can move forward and the citizens of Johnstown be happy with where it's going and not just a hot mess of different things. So thank you for doing it.
Mayor, if I may just
Yes.
throw in one last question or comment for anybody reviewing this or anybody watching. If you're going through this document, this is a process document. There are not going to be uses and setbacks and lot coverage percentages in here. This is a process for how people come with proposals for projects that will have all of those strictures in them that Planning and Zoning Commission and council will get a chance to weigh in on. So just as the public, takes a look at this, bear that in mind, and that this is a forward-looking document for Johnstown's processes, but also structured in a way that would be familiar to a lot of people doing business in Central Ohio.
I have a quick one for that. When talking about the payment in lieu of fees, does the payment in lieu of monies have to be for parkland? Or could it go into like a CIC or from a legal aspect? I don't know, that's what I'm asking.
Yeah, because it's a payment in lieu of dedication of parkland, it would have to go back to some park.
Do we have to, I'm saying like, could you use it for parking? Community parking?
I would tend to say no, because when you start charging a fee for something and then using that money for something else, courts have a tendency to say you're just backdooring a tax onto somebody.
Now, if the parking existed
That's
on
what I'm
a piece of
saying.
parkland,
Yeah.
That's what I was saying.
then you could probably
Yeah.
introduce it
Yeah, if you
into
have a
that.
park,
Well, if you say you have a park and you're gonna,
then
like-
you want to have parking for.
Like we have the trail that we don't have control of, right? It's not a city asset, but you wanna add parking to it.
Stretch.
Could you use the fee in lieu of money for additional parkings in the area of the park or trails or, you know what I'm
There
saying?
just has to be a nexus to that park land aspect.
maybe later.
So
You were going with that.
parking for park use, yes. Parking for,
Businesses.
businesses,
No.
a downtown parking garage or something like that.
Yeah, or like bike paths or anything that's like,
Recreational.
okay, cool.
So in that case, the intent is to make sure that everybody has equitable access
Right.
to recreation facilities,
Yeah.
so if they can't be provided at the time of, at least the city can then provide it later.
Great question.
Any other questions or comments tonight on this, council? Okay.
I will say one thing, sorry. So zoning, we did take a lot of time with this, going through this, but I will say, and Ben can tell you, we did pass this, pending edits that were gonna come through. So, and you're seeing these edits in here. We did not get to see a completely final document in the name of speed. We got through, we made all of our points we wanted to make. There were pending edits, we kind of conditionally approved there. So that's what you guys are seeing here, so. And you probably will hear feedback from members of zoning on that. I know Jesse probably had something. And hopefully he can weigh in next time, so. Some areas that we did want to take a look at, I know that those were highlighted. And as far as how the administrative review board was one of them, how that's created, zoning doesn't have the power to create boards and committees. That's a council thing. So that was something that we didn't weigh into as heavily, and we didn't go about creating that on our own. So that'll be for council. I did see in the final notes here, it was still the ARB. Were you guys looking at changing that? So it doesn't get confused with architectural review. Yeah.
I missed that, yeah.
Yeah, so it doesn't, we didn't want it to get confused with architectural review board, because a lot of other people have that.
Okay. So that is the introduction of legislation. We'll be back on the agenda in 2 weeks for more discussion and passing, or,
Potentially for a vote. We're gonna look a little bit procedurally into that. I think we're tracking in the right direction, but, I'll get with that after this. Yeah, more than likely, how we've done in the past is, if you all wanna vote on it at the next meeting, that is your decision and your ability. Okay, we'll just confirm that, to make sure that's correct.
And if we get comments up until that meeting, we will compile them and we'll be prepared to discuss.
okay. Thank you both very, very much for coming.
Thank you.
Really appreciate you. Any other business? Sean?
I don't have any, except for the other two executive sessions
Yep,
that,
okay.
that I'll let you kind of dive into.
Okay. I make a motion that we move to executive session. There will be a combination executive session. The first executive session is consider the purchase of property. The second executive session is to consider imminent court action. We will need the city manager, council, and our attorney with us, and that will be it tonight.
Action to follow.
And no action to follow afterwards.
I'll second.
Bob Orsini,
Yes.
John Merriman.
Yes.
Mayor Barnard,
Yes.
Ryan Green,
Yes.
Charlie Campbell,
Yes.
Nicole Shook.
Yes.
Thank you guys for coming tonight. Hope you have a wonderful 2 weeks, and we'll see you in a couple of weeks.
Stand here.